Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rector, Miss Maryam Murad, members of faculty, distinguished speakers on the podium, ladies and gentlemen, and my dear students. At the very offset, I am grateful to the University of Management and Technology and the Women Institute of Learning and Leadership for having given me this honor and pleasure of being present amongst you today, and indeed an opportunity to see and witness this tremendous university and your campus. It'll be very difficult for me to move forward in the light of what Arfa Saiba and Dr. Saiba have said, because they have spoken on a very philosophical and a very high plane and level. लेकिन मैं कोशिश करूंगा कि कुछ बात आपके साथ आज के मौजू के ऊपर जो है a way forward, diversity and social inclusion, a way forward for institutional reforms. When I was coming to the university, मैं ये सोच रहा था कि सारी जिंदगी और आज तक शायद मेरी किताबों में गुजरी है। पहले जब आप जैसा तालिब इल्म था, और मेरे बालों पे ना जाइए, वो इतना पुराना अरसा नहीं है, और उसके बाद वकालत में, और उसके बाद पार्लिमान में। But then I thought, and I thought to myself, that I have been reading the world, but perhaps it is time for me to read myself. And when I think of reading myself, तो मेरी सबसे पहले सोच इस बात पे जाती है कि हम डाइवर्सिटी की बात कर रहे हैं। क्या रियासत ने डाइवर्सिटी को तस्लीम किया? हम रिफॉर्म की बात कर रहे हैं, वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट रिफॉर्म, बट इज फैक्चुअली पाकिस्तान looking towards reform? These are some of the basic questions that we need to answer. I think Pakistan or institutions in Pakistan are not ready for reform. And why I say this is because we have always refused reform. And how have we refused reform? If you look a little back into history, you will find that the 1956 Constitution came. We were not ready to accept that parliamentary form of government and democracy. And then, when finally, once again, democracy was restored, we had the 18th Constitutional Amendment, in which a diversification of the federal powers took place. But are we ready to accept that reform? It appears not. So therefore, the basic question that arises is, that Pakistan looks for short-term, technocratic reforms in government, where technocrats in the shape of special assistants act as surrogates for ministers, for people who are to formulate and make policy. This perhaps is because, and let me be a little bold and say, that this perhaps is because we don't have institutions. We are talking about institutional reform. लेकिन क्या पाकिस्तान में अदारे हैं या महज एक मिराज है अदारों का? मेरे हिसाब से अदारे तीन हैं, आइन के हिसाब से अदारे तीन हैं: the executive, the legislature and the judiciary. आज अगर आप इन तीनों अदारों को उठा के देख लें, या अगर आप पाकिस्तान की तारीख का मुतालिया कर लें, तो आपके सामने ये बात आया है that these institutions are a shadow. Is today's executive, or executives in the past, let us not talk about today, but executives in the past, were they able to have control over policy on defense? Were they able to have control over policy on foreign affairs? Were they able to have control over policy on Pakistan's nuclear assets? Were they able to have control over Pakistan's internal security policies? The answer is no. And when an executive is denuded of these fundamental controls, then what is the institution of the executive left with? Let us move on to Parliament. Parliament, for as long as I can remember, has never had the effective say in foreign policy, has never had an effective say in the formulation of government policies or in the formulation of policies on national security. पार्लिमान मां सवाए कि वहां पे बैठ के डिस्कशंस हों, उससे ज्यादा पार्लिमान की हैसियत कभी बनने नहीं दी गई। और जब वो हैसियत नहीं होगी, तो अगर आज मैं ये बात आपके सामने रखूं, with due respect to Dr. Saiba, अगर आज मैं आपके सामने ये बात रखूं that Parliament today is perhaps one of the most redundant so-called institutions. Perhaps if you look at it historically, the Shura of Zia had more powers than the Parliament of today. When you have to pass a bill within 24 hours, without debate, without it following the normal parliamentary procedure, then is that Parliament worth the salt? And are those political parties, including my own, worth the salt? These are difficult and tough questions. It is difficult to say and admit, but I believe that one must have the moral courage. Because today Pakistan stands at the crossroads. Today Pakistan stands at the crossroads when if we do not speak and we do not assert our rights, all roads but one will lead you to the unfortunate Egyptian model. And I, for one, am not ready to accept the Egyptian model. If institutions are to function, keeping the class of your citizenry as the measure of the justice that is to be given to you, then what institutions are we talking about? And therefore I say that do we have institutions? That we talk about institutional reform, but are those institutions there that are to be reformed? We talk about diversity. We talk about social inclusion. But do we realize that over a period of time, what the state has done, and you and me and all of us together, collectively, have stood by as silent observers to the fact that the catchment area from where leadership could have emerged, the state deliberately, with deliberate intent, closed those catchment areas. क्या रियासत का ये फैसला नहीं था कि तालिब इल्म तंजीमों के ऊपर पाबंदी लगा दी जाए? क्या रियासत का ये फैसला नहीं था कि ट्रेड यूनियंस को गाए बगाए खत्म कर दिया जाए? क्या रियासत ने ये सोचे समझे मंसूबे के तहत ये फैसला नहीं किया कि माल रोड के ऊपर जो टी हाउस कल्चर था, उस टी हाउस कल्चर को खत्म कर दिया जाए ताकि एक ऑल्टरनेटिव सोच और पैराडाइम जो है वो जन्म ना ले सके? And as a consequence, we have become a society that is rudderless. We have become a society that is in search of its moorings. You don't have any more fairs. You don't have any more Habib Jalibs. You don't have any more John Elias. और इनके नाम मैं इसलिए ले रहा हूं कि इनसे एक ऑल्टरनेटिव सोच पैदा होती थी, एक ऑल्टरनेटिव पैराडाइम पैदा होती थी, एक कल्चर ऑफ रेजिस्टेंस पैदा होता था। इन दोनों चीजों को खत्म कर दिया, सोसाइटी को बेहिस बना दिया। और ये रियासत ने किया, ये आपने और मैंने उसका हिस्सा बने, लेकिन ये रियासत ने किया। और रियासत ने, जैसे मैंने पहले आपसे कहा, that the state till as of late refused to recognize that Pakistan was a multi-ethnic and a multilingual state. What was tried to have been done was to have created an artificial statehood, an artificial nationality, by preaching to us that the Arab culture is my culture, but the Arab culture is not my culture. My culture is the culture of the Indus. रियासत ने डाइवर्सिटी को तस्लीम नहीं किया. When I would say that I am from Sindh and I want my rights in the federation because I joined the federation, I was not forced, I joined. The Constitution of today provides for backward areas. The Constitution of today provides for quotas. The Constitution of today at 26 places mentions and talks about the rights of minorities. But is the state ready and willing to give those rights? The answer is no. And then it is said that the people of Pakistan, be they Sindhi, be they Punjabi, be they Pakhtun, be they Baloch, be they the minorities, they are not affiliating themselves with the state. Janab, the relationship between the state and the citizen is a relationship of give and take. जब मैं ये महसूस करूंगा कि रियासत मेरे हुकूक के तहफ़्फ़ुज़ कर रही है, तो मैं ऑटोमेटिकली रियासत का दिफा करूंगा. लेकिन जब मैं ये देखूंगा that it is the right or it is the command of the Constitution that the life and liberty of a citizen and property will be protected by the state. But what do I find? I have to employ security guards to protect me. And that is if I can afford it, because the ordinary man on the streets is a vulnerable victim. When it says that the right to electricity will be provided by the state, and I have to put up generators to ensure that I get electricity at home and in your university, then I question. When the Constitution says that fundamental right of health is yours, but when I find that state hospitals are without doctors and without medicines and without machinery, and there are elitist hospitals, then I, as an ordinary citizen, question. And when finally the very basic, when I talk about clean drinking water, and I find that in the arrays of Balochistan and Sindh, man and animal drink from the same water hole, then I begin to question. I begin to question whether these institutions in actual fact exist, and if they exist, is the state ready and willing for any reform? क्योंकि आज तक मुझे तो ये नजर नहीं आया. And in conclusion, let me say that 2 or 3 days ago, it was said that the corrupt system is standing in the way of reform. I beg to differ. I beg to differ because we, or the gentleman, is talking of one stage ahead. According to me, the system is not under attack. Under attack are the people who want to change the system. Under attack are the people. Under attack are the academicians. Under attack is the media. Under attack are the students. If the students get together on the Mall Road, they are subjected to the Anti-Terrorist Act. Under attack are the students. Under attack are the lawyers. Under attack are all those segments of society which seek to change a world that yields most painfully to change. But having been such a pessimist, let me conclude on a slightly optimistic note. And in that, let me say that we have no one else to blame but ourselves. और सबसे पहले एक सियासी कारकुन की हैसियत से मैं उस ब्लेम को तस्लीम भी करता हूं और उसका इतराफ भी करता हूं. मैं इस बात को तस्लीम करता हूं कि इस मुल्क की तमाम तर सियासी जमातें एक कॉर्पोरेट कल्चर का शिकार हो चुकी हैं. लिहाजा आई एम जस्ट वाइंडिंग अप. लिहाजा जो लीडरशिप उनको देनी थी वो ना दे पाई. इसके साथ साथ रियासत ने जिस तरीके से टी हाउस कल्चर को खत्म किया, the culture of resistance died with that. Civil society, which was vocal, which would come out on the streets, like all of us, began to compromise. And the result of that compromise is that today the takeover of the state has never been so complete as we see it today. But the silver lining is that history tells us, Pakistan's history tells us, the history of the third world tells us that when a people unite and a people begin to question, then the tide of history flows with them. Thank you.